You know, the dyed-in-the-wool Liberal supporter seems far too often to have to shake his or her head in bewilderment. There's a pre-selection battle in New South Wales this Saturday to select the candidate for the vacant Senate spot following the untimely death of Jim Molan. This is a litmus test for the Liberal Party. The unmentioned James Brown, I think he's a very, very good candidate. There is an unknown opportunist, Maria Kovacic, you've never heard of her, who got beaten badly as a drop-in candidate at last year's federal election in the seat of Parramatta, virtually unknown. And then the factions, here we go again, tipped her into the New South Wales Liberal Party presidency. It'd be laughable if it wasn't so serious. And now the ideological mob, who are the architects of Australia being a political ocean of red, are now trying to manipulate the numbers to get her this Senate spot. Well, politics, I'm saying, is about many things, but above all, loyal and proven service. I was there when the bushfires savaged the south coast of New South Wales a couple of years ago. Devastation that you can't imagine. I remember taking a call from the member Andrew Constance, who'd been successful in many portfolios in the New South Wales government, acknowledged by Gladys Berejiklian. He'd been Treasurer, Transport Minister, but on the phone to me, he was weighed down, almost broken, by the burden that he accepted of properly serving people who'd lost everything. I remember getting a helicopter to go down to see him. I was worried that so much was being asked of one person, but he never yielded, night and day, every day. And he's still helping serve that part of the world. He's a candidate to replace Jim Molan. I've got nothing to say other than two things. Worthy, Constance, of course. But if service to others is the hallmark of political representation, Andrew Constance has a century of service to his name. If the Liberal Party on Saturday doesn't see that, then the public will know that no matter how many defeats it suffers, it still refuses to learn. But to Queensland, oh, God help me. You might recall last week I spoke to the opposition leader David Crisafulli, and I asked him about treaties that the Palaszczuk Government was legislating to initiate actually, with Indigenous Queenslanders, based on the so-called recognition of the amount of land allegedly taken by British colonial forces and the impact of massacres. And I mentioned that at a cabinet meeting in North Queensland, the Palaszczuk Government was talking about treaties with 150 different Indigenous nations in Queensland. And we were told the financial impacts would vary depending on the impacts of colonisation. I asked David Crisafulli in that interview, did he agree with this? Have a look at that exchange. Now, what you mentioned this cabinet meeting in Cairns. What's all this nonsense that the Palaszczuk Government had that meeting and passed a treaty process allegedly setting the standard in Indigenous government relations to recognise the amount of land taken by, this is an invention, by British colonial forces and the impact of massacres. Do you agree with all of this? My understanding is the coalition voted in favour of it.
Well, Alan, there wasn't a single mention about any of that in the bill. And let me tell you what I spoke about in my contribution. They talk about truth-telling. I do want to tell some truths, and I want to do some good for Indigenous people.
Now, David Crisafulli, you want to tell some truths. I asked you specifically there, did you agree with the government proposing treaties to 150 Indigenous nations in Queensland? Now, in hindsight, I failed in the interview. I should have pulled you up because you didn't really answer me, but I trusted you. I thought you were telling the truth. That's what you said. You just wanted to tell some truths. Now it appears clear why you didn't answer, because you're now on the record as saying that you won't roll back Indigenous treaty legislation if you become Premier. Well, David Crisafulli, I've got to tell you, you're a good bloke, but the fact that you won't may well prevent you from ever being Premier. The laws have now been passed in Queensland with the support of David Crisafulli's coalition, allowing the Palaszczuk Government to negotiate dozens of treaty deals with First Nations groups. No budget, no details, but they'll involve financial settlements worth hundreds of millions of dollars each, which of course the government doesn't have, and could result in changes to school curricula, the names of place names of suburbs and rivers, reforms in health, criminal justice, child protection. And we are told that all 34 coalition MPs, led by David Crisafulli, voted in favour of the laws.